As you may know by my voice, this is John W. Harriman, Sr. This date is October 1988. I have made a cassette tape copy of a reel-to-reel tape, which was of my father, Jake, talking to my son, Danny, and I. My mother, Nettie, my wife, Helen, and some of our children were in the house too. So this may have been in the middle or late 50s. As the original tape is old, there are some flaws and disturbances, so please hang in there through thick and thin. John.
Hello, Danny. Come up here now. I want to tell you some story.
You may have to go a little bit closer because it's, our voice is real.
You mean talk close to this? You know, when Beulah was a little girl, we was living in New Haven then.
Just a minute.
And we had a big schoolhouse there, and we had a school, lots of school.
Okay.
And they had a big schoolhouse there, and they had a school, last day of school meeting there. And Beulah, she was going to speak a piece. She was just a little thing about like your sister, Shirley. And she got up on the platform, and she had little short dresses on, putting her up to her knees. When she bowed over, she says, "Here I stand on my two little feet, make my bow and take my seat." They just clapped their hands and just roared all over the big schoolhouse. And so they thought maybe they'd be let her go back and speak another one. And she says, "Here I stand, all ragged and dirty. When the boys come to kiss me, I'll run like a turkey." Turkey. It was pretty cute.
It
What?
was funny anyway, didn't it?
Yeah. And when Mildred was a little girl, she was living there in New Haven, just come down from Freeland a short time. And one night, Mother and I slept in the downstairs bedroom, and the other bedroom's all upstairs. There's an open stairway, and she got in her head one night that she wanted to sit up. She didn't want to go to bed yet. But she was all undressed and sitting in a high chair. And so we went into our room and we turned off the light. And she says, "Well, I don't want to sit up here all alone." So, we had lots of fun with the kids when they was little. And that's where Owen and Evelyn was born, in New Haven. We had Mildred and Blanche. When we moved to New Haven, they was born in Freeland. I run a creamery up there.
You can hold it a little further if you want, and I'll tune it up a little bit louder here. I think it'll be all right. If it's more natural for you, hold it a little bit further away. It's all right, anytime.
Well, I don't know what to say. Yeah, when I was working for Mr. Cotton, We had a nice team of horses, captain and colonel, and they'd had some good men there working for them before I went there, see? And I guess the old man, he understood horses pretty well. He always rode a horse in the army, see? So when I went there to work, them two horses, boy, they'd go down through the cornfield, and we'd had them trained so close that they'd go clear across the field with the lines just over my neck or around my waist. Never pull on them or anything. They wouldn't even put their foot down. They'd say, whoa, quick. And even jerk their foot back. Like.
You say they'd step on something, huh?
Yeah. And we could haul them around or gee them around. They'd go all the way, turn right around, go back to the next row without stepping on a hill. Row after row we used to do it.
Hang in there for a while. Pretty quick. I hope.
But that is a year I worked before I went to C.C. Shoemaker's Porter Farm 1 year between. See, I was out there one summer. Now the next summer, about 1st of April, I went to looking for a job. Will Southern wanted a man. My mother didn't like to have me work for him because he's a regular slave driver. I said, some of the other boys had worked there for him. But I went there and they'd already hired a man. So they said, Mr. Cotton wants a man. So I went over there, and I never saw him before, just know him. Yeah, I heard about him and saw her out to the Congregational Church occasionally. But she was dressed all this in red. It's like a peacock. Great big wide-rimmed hat and two big long braids on her back. And her eyes looked so that kind of sunk in like. I thought she was funny looking then. And she all dressed in red from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. And she had quite dark hair. Two long braids, double braids. She could sit right on her braids when she could sit down. And they're both hanging, see?
I remember when she had long hair, yeah.
Yeah. Now we cut it off in Friday. It's hot down there. So we cut it off. And then I went out to Shoemaker. Worked out there one summer and I thought I'd come home for a little vacation before I went back over the Christmas holidays. He was away, but I got permission by writing to him, as is the clerk there did. And then he said I could go. So when I come back, got home, he wrote me a letter and told me I'd better stay at home now, seeing I'd got back. That a Japanese boy that worked there the year before would like his job back. He'd come back from California. This is in northern Illinois where I was working. So I stayed at home. And the next spring, that's when I went over to Cotton's. And he was just driving out of the yard with that same team, the big captain and colonel. She was Army names, captain and colonel. There were 2 officers in the army name. And he had a pair of drags up on a mud sled he borrowed. He was taking them home. And I first caught up to him. He stopped, asked if he wanted to hire a hired man. He said, well, I guess maybe I will. He says, I'll give you a job. You can come tomorrow if you want it. About the 1st of April. That's the time they generally went on a farm to work. $10 a month, my board and washing. What do you pay me? Well, I used to get enough by asking for them some to buy my tobacco. I was using tobacco then even, and before that. But I worked there all that summer. I never worked any harder there. It's just about as bad as Scotch at Lafarge's. Well, when you start down to cut corn by hand in a 15-acre field, and you cut clear across there and shock it up in the shock. There were so many feet, you know. Take about 7 rows to a shock, and after I got it all cut, a couple of 3 weeks, I had to begin to husk that all by hand out in the field and haul it all up, put it in a crib. Well, I guess I'll have to quit. I might add, to make the story a little more interesting maybe, this wife of mine was about 316 then, and we got quite chummy. Finally, I got a job in the creamery there at Chesterfield, and I boarded there to cotton, paid them board me for $8 a month for 8 months for $10 a month. And that's next spring. I went up to Freeland. I went out to school that winter, rather, and perfected my course, a 6 weeks course out there to East Lansing. And I come back and went up to Freeland, worked up there one summer, and then I come back down home for the winter. We didn't run it only one summer because we wasn't afraid we wouldn't get enough in. Farmers wasn't very much prepared to patronize the creamery. So I stayed at home. Before I went back, I married Cotton's daughter and took her up there with me. And there's where we got our start in our family. Yeah. Oh, yeah, she's quite a clipper. When I first married her, everybody admired her. You met. Pretty good cook. I run the creamery in Freeland 3 or 4 summers, 4 altogether. Then the man that owned the creamery, he bought it from the farmers up there. They had an $8,000 or $800 mortgage on it, and they told him he'd pay the mortgage so that the farmers wouldn't have to pay it. Why, they'd let him have it for $800. The whole creamery cost several thousand. But I worked there 4 summers. We built one skimming station and bought more milk in, and he paid for all of it and sold the creamery $5,000 after me being there 4 years, 4 summers.
Pretty good outfit.
Yeah. And then I come down to New Haven after he sold it, and I didn't know what I'd do around there, but I moved my goods down there. So we stayed there a while, and I soon found out that they was having trouble in the creamery there. They hadn't paid off. They'd been running 6 years. They never paid a penny on it. That is, never paid them any dividends, see. So after I'd been there, starting on the 2nd year, they paid back all paid all their indebtedness on it. They had about $3,000 worth of debts on it, and for poor managing. And they put me in manager. I ran it there for 5 years, and I was just kind of getting sick of it, and tied down too much, getting up early mornings.
Every morning, wasn't it?
Every morning in the summertime, every other morning in the winter. And
You mean every other Sunday?
We ran 4 days a week. 4 days a week in the wintertime. It's Friday and Saturday, and then we'd skip Sunday, see. They could hold the milk over that day. Yeah, but in the summertime, they couldn't keep their milk. Run it every day in the summertime.
Run it every day.
Yeah, Sundays and all. So it made quite steady work. I thought about time I'd go and try something else. But I was on the village board. I was on the village the school district board, and they put me on. They voted me in township clerk, and then I had around it all that stuff and didn't bring anything. And winter coming on that fall, I heard advertisements they wanted to buttermilk over this field. So I went over to see the fellow. The fellow was there. He wanted to get out of it. It was a poor job. The equipment business was taking a big change about that time and going from a different process of handling. And towers, I worked there one summer, and a supply agent come along, and he says, "You want a better job?" He says, "A big tower creamery in Detroit wants a man." They've been having the professor out there at Agricultural College to run it there, but he had another job. He wanted to go back into the college business. That's why they was trying to get another man, a good man, see. So I went there and I operated it for 5 years till they began to get new ways of doing things. Instead of bringing it in milk cans, they began bringing it in trucks. My son was out dancing at the time, and he wasn't around. His wife, she kind of took charge of being the office woman, clerk. Oh, well, I can't go into detail. All the stuff is there. But only they was paying most places was for carpenter work. And I had done a little lot when I was young, so I went to farming. And so my brother told me he'd been working at it quite a while down there.
What brother was that?
Charlie. And Charlie Harriman. He told me, he said, you just go and get you a good saw, cross butt and a rip saw, and a square, and a good hammer. Then you go out to the first job you see, and tell them that you're not very well experienced, but you do the best you could. If you hadn't tried me out, I'd go to work for them. He said, you're right on the job. It was hard luck with help. And the foreman there, he was up on a ladder, scaffold, and he'd tell another fellow and I how to put a square and how to handle it to get certain cuts, cutting rafters and one thing and another. And I soon caught on to it.
How old were you about then?
Well, I was probably about 27, 26, 27 around. Oh, then it's all the same all the way down through life. Tried a lot of different things.
You got the weather stripping too, didn't you?
Yeah, I certainly got Bob coming out here with did weather stripping and more carpenter work, some around.
You finished the library over there at the Harriman School, didn't you? Put shelves in over at the Harriman School library.
I put a new basement on it
Yeah,
and made it 5 feet longer by cutting it in two and shoving it over on the new wall and build it up in between.
You don't want to help him on that job?
No, not on that one. But I had a helper, and the man had the big timbers, he's a mover. He raised the schoolhouse right up. I had to make it high enough so that you build full basement underneath. And I had to build the cement blocks up under it.
Then you also made some shelves and things in the new school, didn't you?
Well, the school, the superintendent, the state superintendent come down and inspect it. And the chimney should have been housed in, but he didn't mention it in the plans. But he says, you'll get a new contract for that, and we allow you. You build building around it, down on the first floor, made a library and a coal bin down the basement. All out of that part.
That was a little white schoolhouse, huh?
Yeah. Made longer, see?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I can't do any more now. And all I school. So, take it all together.
Hello, this is John again. You're soon going to hear some CB language, and it will be my son Danny and me talking. So listen in.
19W75 13